everyone, welcome to the IGD webinar on growing your confidence with a positive mindset. My name is Liz Villani and I'm the founder of a company called Courageous Success. But before I did this role, I was in your industry. So I studied manufacturing at university and worked in retail for kind of my early career in my 20s. So I understand kind of what it's like to be at the beginning of your career in this industry. And I wish that if I could turn back the clock, that I would have had the confidence and some of the tools that I want to share in this webinar way back then, and the difference that it would have made to not only my success, but also my career and my enjoyment and everything else that you can explore in your working world would have been enormous. So today's session, what I really want to do is spend some time to share some of those tools and tactics. So for the last 15 years, I've been focusing on people around the world rather than food and consumer goods, but the people within it, along with other industries. And along that route, there are a number of things that I want to share with you today to grow your confidence and really kind of focus with some simple tools on a positive mindset. So we're going to run for 45 minutes. We will leave space for a Q&A, and you can ask questions using the chat as we go. We're going to have a couple of live polls, so please get involved. Tell us what you think as we go through the session, and there'll be some time at the end to have a Q&A and ask any questions that you've got. And as Robin said, there's an editable worksheet. You can use pen and paper. You should be able to download it straight from this webinar, and you'll also be able to listen to the recording. So let's get going. So what I want to do is really explore a couple of things with you in today's call. Your resilience. How resilient are you? What are your confidence triggers? All of us are making up as we go along. All of us at times feel like an imposter. What is it that is a trigger point for you? Because if we can understand those things, then it'll help us to be much more conscious of confidence and growing and developing ourselves and our confidence at work. But I want to really share a few tips with you around kind of nerves and stress and how to deal with those, particularly when you want to impress. Because when we're in the early parts of our careers, we haven't necessarily got all of the knowledge and skills that some of our colleagues have. So we can feel a little bit vulnerable at certain times. So I want to share some of those things and really look at how we can use our own consciousness and positivity to deal with nerves and stress. We're also going to look at the power of having a mindset that's positive, and I'm going to share some tactics with you that you can use to actually grow your influence, because you want to be remembered, and you want to be remembered for being you and making a difference. So I want to share a few tools with you to help you to grow your confidence throughout your career. So Robin, if you wouldn't mind moving forward. Where we'll start is have a look at our levels of resilience. And I want to share some statistics, can't speak today, with you. If you wouldn't mind moving on, Robin, to the next slide. Because one of the challenges around confidence that I find is that most people think it's just them that are sometimes challenged with their confidence. And I promise you that confidence is a challenge for all of us, and not just in the beginning at the early start of our career, but throughout our career. I'm afraid to say that you'll always have times when you doubt yourself. And that's why confidence should be a development journey throughout your whole career. So here's some of these facts. End of last year, I ran a webinar for the IGD that we looked at imposter syndrome. 93% of people on that webinar shared that they experience imposter syndrome at certain times at work. So it's not just you, it's all of us. We know, because we measure this in terms of our Being Yourself at Work survey, that only 25% of us can accept a compliment. If you can't accept a compliment, then actually you're not going to be resilient. You're not necessarily going to feed your confidence. So this is a good measure, and it's a good thing, a good tactic before we even begin the rest of this session. That's a barometer of your confidence. Am I accepting this compliment? all of us tend to treat ourselves with an element of negativity versus the way we would treat others. We know that 50% of us have no positive inner self-talk at all. And 75% of people actually say that when it is there, when we are kind of internally thinking and reflecting on ourselves, that it's actually critical. You know, we tend to be our own worst enemies. We wouldn't necessarily talk to other people or the people we care about or work with or our best friends and family in the same way that we talk to ourselves. So we're going to challenge some of that in today's session. 83% of us tend to look for recognition from others to drive our confidence at work. So in other words, if people give us positive feedback or recognize our contribution in some way, that makes us feel more confident. And the challenge with that, as we're going to see, is that actually recognition from others is outside of your control. So we're not all going to be resilient and build a resilient kind of strategy if we're relying on something that we can't actually do anything about. So I want to challenge the use of recognition in today's session. 100% of employees that we survey around the world globally share that they use autonomy and control to feel good enough at work. Okay, and this is a big challenge. You can't control everything. You can't always do things your way, and you won't always be trusted or delegated to get things right. So there's lots of dynamics around confidence and resilience and positivity that actually all of us can struggle with at certain times. Robin, would you mind moving forward? Before we begin then, in terms of kind of unpicking confidence and your own resilience, I would like to run a poll. Robert, if you wouldn't mind running this poll for us. So it's a simple question that you're going to see. Yes or no? I often have times when I doubt myself at work. So the poll is open, and what I'd like you to do is just state whether you, yes, absolutely. I often have times when I doubt myself. Maybe you hide it. Most of us try to. Or actually no, and just fill in that poll for us. Because the challenge is that we, as I said, all tend to doubt ourselves. We're all making it up as we go along. You know, people, all of us aren't as confident as other people perhaps think that we are as well. And this can cause lots of challenge, because if you doubt yourself, you'll hesitate, you'll perhaps hold back from things that maybe you would do really well at. And actually, often the people around us are recognizing us more than we're recognizing ourselves. So Robin, would you mind sharing the results of the poll for us? There you go. Okay, so if you ever needed reassurance that actually it's not just you that's doubting yourself at work, there it is. 92% of the audience on this webinar have times when you doubt yourself at work. We all do. So the first thing is recognize it. We need to do something about it, and this is something that, you know, the vast majority of us need to work on. And if you're one of those 8%, keep going, because I'm going to give you some key kind of tools and drivers to really build on that resilience. Fantastic. What I don't want us to do is to really reflect and kind of think, oh, therefore I'm not confident. There's no point in actually regretting, you know, aspects of yourself. We need to be kind to ourselves and kind of develop and understand what it is that drives a lack of resilience sometimes, or drives or triggers a lack of confidence, because that kind of has a result. So Robin, let me share the journey, if you wouldn't mind moving forward, of the challenges that we then face when we struggle with our confidence at work. Because this happens to all of us, and it kind of creates a cycle. So here we are at the beginning on the left hand side, we have this self-doubt. We tend to worry what people think about us. What can then happen at stage 2 at the top is we get self-conscious, and the minute we get self-conscious, we can start to overthink, and we can start to doubt ourselves and our fit and our competence and our approach and all those things. That then causes us to change, to impress. And so we start to create this workplace persona that we perceive will be valued by others. So we, appear competent and capable and those things. What we tend to then do is hold ourselves back, so we'll reduce our influence, and that means that we are less able to make a difference at work. We'll compare ourselves to others and think, well, they're much more capable than me, why aren't I like that? And thinking that we should be better than we are, and all of that reduces essentially you being at your best. So it creates potentially this cycle of self-doubt. So go through these stages, we've got the doubt, we get conscious, we react and change, we hold ourselves back, we compare ourselves to other people and feed the self-doubt. Therefore I can't and I shouldn't and I am not confident as I could be. So I'm going to worry about, again, how I come across and what people are thinking about me. So what we've got to do is challenge and break this cycle when we think about our own confidence. And there are some tools that I want to use to do that. So we're going to go straight to the workbook now. So if you want to open up your workbook, the worksheet, if you go past that first page, you'll just see page 2. So Robin, if you wouldn't mind just moving forward one for me. When you open the worksheet, what you'll see on the left-hand side is an exercise on your confidence and triggers. And this is where I want to begin, because who you are is unique. Your upbringing, your environment, your experience, where you work, we're all unique as people. And so we can be triggered by different things as a result. Understanding what it is that might trigger self-doubt is hugely powerful, because once you know what that is for you, you can be conscious of it and then work on it and react in a different way. So I want to take you on a journey. So on the left-hand side of your worksheet, you've been given a space. You might want to save your worksheet if you're using one and you haven't done it already. Some people print it out. You might just use pen and paper for this stage of the exercises, but you can type into it, okay, to make sure you save it. So on the left-hand side, you're being asked to make a list of the thoughts and circumstances that potentially kind of like trigger you, that make you doubt yourself. So examples would be perhaps, having to be in a position where you've got to speak up in a meeting or in front of others. It might be when you get some challenging feedback, or you've got to speak to somebody who's senior to you or you've never met before. It could be that it's about new things, or just kind of that sense of occasion and formality. So maybe you've got to go into a senior meeting that you've not been before. What I'd like you to do is reflect on your working world and make just a few notes, just a few bullet points on what situations, what scenarios, what circumstances, what thoughts do you go, and you're kind of triggered into feeling that doubt? What kind of scenarios? So I'm just going to give you a second to do that. That feeling like I've just gone through, where you doubt and then you get self-conscious and then you worry about what people think. So then you kind of think, oh, I've got to change to impress, and then kind of present this work image and then compare yourself to others, and oh, have I done that well? What is it that triggers you? What circumstances? And it may be people, it may be certain people as well that you work with, okay, that are more senior to you or different to you, or those things. But the important thing is that you start to reflect and know what these things are, because they tend to form patterns throughout our careers, okay? So once you've done that, and even if you've got one circumstance, it's absolutely fine. Use that circumstance to now reflect going forward in this webinar. On the right-hand side, the next part of the worksheet talks about making a list of your strengths and positive thoughts. What I'd like you to do is, if you're typing in, just write I am, okay, so 2 words, I am, and if you're writing it down, just write I am. And then what I would like you to do is write down your positive strengths as a person, okay, at least 2 or 3, okay. We all have really good aspects about ourselves. So an example might be, well, actually, I'm really creative. I love brainstorming and those things. So I am a creative person. You know, the vast majority of us are actually really kind. We do genuinely care about each other. So, you know, I'm kind, I am caring, I am thoughtful, I'm inquisitive. Those kinds of statements will be really you, if you like. You know, so you might think, actually, I'm very sort of logical and structured and organized and those things, but make sure that you've got at least 3 or 4 statements. So I'm kind, I'm creative. Just think about you as a person when you're at work, not just about your skill. You might be brilliant at spreadsheets and brilliant at whatever it is that you do in your world at work. What about you as a person? Because in those moments when you're triggered, it's you that matters. It's you that you're going to be with. Okay. So like everyone to have at least 3 or 4 positive I am statements, confident statements that are real. We all have strengths. What are yours? So we've reflected on what our triggers are, those moments when we tend to doubt ourselves. We've reflected on who we are and our strengths as a person, and got a few kind of black and white things that we are, that are our strengths. What I want to do is just share some tips with you for that moment on the trigger. So Robin, if you wouldn't mind moving forward one. So we're in that trigger moment, okay? We're in that trigger moment. We all have them. That moment when we start to question and self-doubt and start to change and compare ourselves to others. And that means that we can then start to wobble. Even if we're trying to show that we're not, we can get nervous and start to get stressed. And I want to share 3 tools to manage those nerves and stress, particularly in that trigger moment, okay, when you need help. So on the left, let's focus on this one first. One of the things that happens when we get stressed and nervous is that we can start to almost feel like outside of the conversation. Our brains can go into overdrive. We'll start to overthink things. We'll start to worry. The emotion will come in. And that means that we might not always listen, we might not always hear. Why? Because the vast majority of our consciousness, our thinking in that moment is on ourselves rather than the person we're trying to impress. Okay, so my first tip when you're in that moment to deal with that nerves and stress is actually to step, just energy wise, really in with that person or that scenario. Be really present. Just listen. Step in with a mindset to make a difference in that moment. Okay. Tip number 2, what happens then, because we want to impress, is that we tend to literally say everything that we think needs to be said to show our competence and skill. So if you look at the center of this slide deck, you'll see a pile of fruit. And one of my top tips for dealing with nerves and stress in that moment, rather than going, you know, oversharing potentially, which can make us more nervous and then get more self-conscious and those things, is share one point at a time. Imagine that deck of fruit. Okay, you're faced with that trigger scenario, you've stepped in with presence. So you're going to share one thing. It might be one piece of information, it might be one thought, it could be one thing that, even if you do a presentation, you've got to do one thing, give them one piece of information rather than everything you know. Once you've shared that, you might then share another slice, or you may ask the person you're talking to, what else would you like to know? And then you give them the orange or the lemon. Okay, but you're literally checking in each time. What else do you need to know? Is there anything further that I can help with? You know, you're kind of literally giving slice by slice by slice rather than sharing everything because of that pressure to impress and those nerves in that moment. My third tip is something that is about developing over time. It is about treating and being the same person at all levels within your organization. So this is something that you can work on immediately. Okay, and I'm going to share some other tips that are going to feed into your ability to do this. Most of us tend to change and adapt when we're faced with our trigger points. So seniority, people that, difficult circumstances and scenarios, people we don't know very well will be quite different maybe with our kind of core team we work with to how we are with completely new people that we haven't worked with before. The trick is to be the same person, irrelevant of actually how much and how long you've known somebody or the seniority of that person. And I'm going to share a secret with you. As long as you're being your best, people buy authenticity in people. And so rather than maybe get more serious or wooden or, kind of like factual or overshare or, kind of wobbly, if you like, for some of us, just be you, basically, and be the same person, whether you're talking to a senior manager, a director, or a colleague that you see every morning as you enter the building or you enter your Zoom or Teams meeting. Be consistent, be you, don't, be the same person with everybody. That will also make you feel comfortable ultimately, because it feels good to be ourselves. We're not pretending to be somebody else, which actually is really quite hard. So there's 3 core tips to help you in those moments of trigger when you think, okay, I'm feeling quite self-conscious now and wobbling. Step in, share one thing at a time, and be you consistently. So let's have a look at our levels of resilience. So if you go back to the worksheet, on the right hand side, so if you wouldn't mind moving forward, Robin, in the slide deck, on the right hand side you will see a exercise, 10 questions there, and you can rate basically how much you agree with each of those statements. Okay, so if you just use your mouse, if you're using the PDF, or just kind of make notes if you've printed off, there's 10 questions. Just rate your agreement with each of those statements. Automatically, if you're using the PDF, you will create a score out of 100. If you're doing it on paper, you can use your phone to add it up. Or if you're an account, so you might just be able to just add it up straight away. Okay, so answer those 10 questions. How resilient am I? Right. So I'm just going to give you a second just to reflect and answer those questions for me. How resilient am I? So in my experience, most of us are less resilient than we try to portray to other people. There are a number of levers that will lift the scores on the 10 questions, and I'm going to share some of those in this webinar coming up. One of the things that I would just kind of point out on here is that you're aiming, ideally you'd be aiming for a score of 80. The vast majority of us have a score under 50. So, don't sort of look at your scores and think, oh my God, I'm like completely unresilient. Actually, this is a journey of development, and the levers of resilience are all built into the scoring that you can see on your worksheet. But question 10, I don't need to be right, and I am happy to ask if I don't have the answers. One of the things that can happen when you think about that cycle of self-doubt and then the self-consciousness, and then you change and adapt, and then you try and impress, and then you become this workplace person, everything else, is that we tend to feel like we need to prove our competence. We measure this, 100% of us feel at work that we have to prove our competence. And what that means, particularly when you look at question 10 around needing to be right, is that we tend to push out our knowledge. So what can happen is that we kind of like just literally, I am competent, I'm going to share this data and information, everything else. And what that means is that we always feel like we need to know, we need to be in control, we need to know our stuff. And we're all humans. The vast majority of the time in your general day, you probably do know your stuff, but in those trigger moments that you've noted, actually, you might really feel that, you know, I'm not good enough in this moment, and this is a trigger moment, and I can't really prove, you know, my competence and those things, and therefore I'm having a wobble. So I would encourage everybody to really have a high score on question 10 and actually know it's okay to not know the answers sometimes. I always say to my daughter when she goes to school and, you know, she's like, oh, you know, I need to do X, Y, and Z. It's like, you're actually there to learn. You're not there to prove that you know what you're talking about. You're actually there to learn. And in our early careers in particular, we need to be really open to learning. Ask questions, find out more. Don't always feel like you need to prove and show your competence, and that will drive your resilience, and you'll become a lifelong learner, which in my experience also adds up to career success. Okay, because you'll be open-minded and agile and all the things that we're looking for in the world of work today and going forward. So what I'd like to do then is just come back in, and we're going to do another poll. So we've got a couple of polls that I'd like us to look at, having done that exercise. The first one is around your new confidence statement. So we've looked at your strengths as a person. You've made a list of a few of them. You've got I am at the top, I am funny, I am logical, I am creative. So Robin, if you wouldn't mind running that first poll, what I'd like you to do is yes or no. When you look at those new confidence statements, your strengths. Okay, yes or no, my new confidence statements make me feel empowering and energizing. They feel empowering and energizing. And just share yes or no with us on this poll. Just going to give you a minute to do that. And then what I would love is if anybody in the audience listening would like to share, if anyone feels that, you know, maybe you feel like you've learned something about a certain situation and what, you know, the fact that that was a trigger, and actually, you know, your confidence statements are almost like the opposite of that, then, you know, we'd love to kind of hear your story. So if you'd like to unmute and just kind of share any insights that you've had from that, that would be great. Robin will keep an eye out to do that. Maybe.
So Liz, I do actually have somebody who's volunteered, so you can speak to them now. We can wait to the second poll, and then I can go back to them.
Yeah, great. Let's have the first poll results first, run the second, and then let's have a chat. It'd be great.
Fantastic. I will come back. So just know, Cheryl Savage, I can see your hand is up, so we're going to come to you once we run the second poll. Okay, so let's just, I'll just share this first poll.
Yeah,
there we go.
Interesting. Yes. So 79% of us, and nearly 80% of us, feel that those statements feel empowering and energizing. What I really want to say when you think about these poll results is this is you. Okay, so if you read those, when you read those, the fact that they feel empowering and energizing, that is confidence. So tactically use that list. You know, you've got it on this worksheet. What are you going to do with it? Maybe you put it onto a post-it note and just remember and be conscious of your strengths. Okay, and if you're still kind of struggling, so if you're one of the 21%, I want you to keep going through this webinar and reflecting on some tools and tactics to kind of grow your self-confidence, because, you know, your strengths, you need to recognize what those are and really feel that they are empowering and use them for your confidence in those moments. So Robin, let's run the second poll, and then we'll have a chat with a member of the audience. Would be brilliant. So the second poll is, reading my new confidence statements, I feel more myself. So rate your agreement. When you read those new I am funny, logical, caring, creative, in that moment, when you read them, do you feel more you? Yes or no? Okay, so just use the poll, yes or no. Do you feel more you? And then Robin, let's please invite someone to share some of their insights from this last experience.
Okay, well, it turns out that the person I was going to bring up pressed the button by mistake, so we're not going to be inviting, we're not going to be bringing them up, but that does mean that there is room for somebody else to speak to Liz. So if you would like to, please raise your virtual hand now, and if nobody does, that's also okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, we do have someone. So James Sivright, apologies if I've mispronounced your surname. I'm going to unmute you, and you'll be able to speak live with Liz. Okay, you can speak.
Hi there, Liz. Thanks,
Hi.
Robin. You pronounced it perfectly. Yeah, so I was a yes, and the reason I said yes on the confidence statements, feel empowering and energizing, is I think that in the chaos and kind of hecticness of work, your mind doesn't naturally stop and check back in with yourself. So I think like a moment of calm like this, and just taking a reminder of yourself to get back connected with your strengths, I do find really empowering. So actually, thanks very much for giving me an energy boost in the middle of the day today.
Yes, good. I'm so glad that you shared that, James. Thank you so much, because you know, we just have, most of us, we would say, have a low relationship with ourselves. I don't mean that in a negative sense, but we just like get on with it, don't we? We're so busy doing what we do that we kind of forget to remember that actually we are good at these things and good at those things, to give ourselves that energy.
Yeah, spot on. Yeah.
Brilliant. So what are you going to do with your confidence statements?
Well, I think I did a piece of work earlier, well, middle of last year, on character strengths, and I realised I've got out the habit of staying connected to those. So my commitment to myself, I've scribbled here, is to keep coming back and doing little bits like this and just remind myself. So make a few more breaks, 10, 15 minutes, maybe just have a bit of me time to reflect on, okay, take a moment. So that was my big action.
Yeah, well done.
Reinforce the habit.
Love it. Thank you for sharing. It is simple, but actually, you know, we just don't remember to do it. And because our consciousness can take over and we tend to sort of self-criticize and then compare in that journey, then it can kind of spiral and feed the self-doubt. So thank you for sharing with us. So Robin, let's have a look at the results of this second poll then. Reading my confidence statements, I feel more myself. Let's have a look at that. Let's look at these results. Yes, yes, 85%. Okay, top tip in any stage of your career, and I say this with real confidence and masses of experience, there is no one else that you can be better than you. And when we're talking about confidence and positive mindset and those trigger moments when we might just wobble, if in that moment you can just be yourself, you will impress. You will be unique. And I don't mean, I'm going to come to it, you know, self-deprecating and you know, all of those things. You at your best. It's so powerful for you to just be yourself at work and just be you. And you make yourself stand out as unique and different and use your strengths to kind of help. So in that moment, remember, recite those confidence statements, even if it's one of them, okay? At that moment, you'll then feel more you, and then something happens, which is we tend to relax. Stop comparing ourselves to others. We'll stop to overthink and worry in those things, and we'll just be us. Add in those tools under stress and pressure. Step in, one piece of information at a time, and then really being us. Magic. Okay, so hopefully that helps you. There's a point on the right hand side. You know, you aren't your self-doubts. That's not who you are. You aren't your kind of like CV or skills or story. You're you. You're absolutely unique. So use that make a lifelong kind of decision to understand more about you and use your uniqueness and use yourself, and that will absolutely help you with your confidence and your nerves in those moments. So let's keep moving forward. What I want to do is to share some tactics and tools with you to unlock a more positive mindset, but also grow your influence. A positive mindset, being you, being remembered, fueling and developing your confidence, will really help you to have influence throughout your career. So the first one I've got on here is about what we touched on earlier. So that reliance on recognition. Okay. And as I said, if we tend to rely on recognition and people saying we're doing a good job and doing well and we're being heard and listened to and we're getting, high scores on our performance reviews or whatever, for as long as we look outside of ourselves for our confidence, we can always potentially have self-doubt. Why? Because it's out of our control. Okay. So number one tactic is rely on yourself for your confidence and be conscious of that rather than relying on others or situations or circumstances. You'll then really drive your resilience, and that's a positive mindset. My second one on here is about not letting your mood be affected by others. So, I want you to all think of doing a little exercise with me. Think about somebody that you'd rather not see right now, okay? It could be anybody. It could be, I don't know, somebody that you didn't really get on with at some stage in your life, or so, it could be somebody in the public eye, like a nothing wrong with politicians, but it could be a politician or somebody on the TV that you don't particularly like, but somebody you just rather not see right now, okay? Hold that person in your mind's eye and think about that. Imagine this moment, the door opened on the room that you're in and that person walked in right now. What happens to you? Most of us will get, kind of frustrated, or our energy will go down, so we're kind of like sapped, or we'll get kind of aggressive. Some of us might just kind of walk away. We definitely don't really want to see this person right now. Our energy will be affected in different ways, but it'll still be affected. Now I ask you this question: who is affecting your mood? Who is it? Who is it that is actually making you change? And the answer is you. Only you have the power to actually decide on your response to anything in any circumstances. Nobody can make you cross, no one can make you frustrated, no one can make you angry. I know it's easy to think that, but actually only you have the power to do that. But we're kind of filterless. We just let the moods and kind of like other people's kind of approaches that we don't always gel with affect us. So decide what you're going to let into your energy. And as it says on here, no one can affect your mood or make you frustrated. Keep that power. Okay, so keep that power to choose your emotional response. Okay, am I going to let that energy in, or am I going to not let this energy in? This is your space, your zone. No one can infiltrate that unless you let them. Third tactic out of 6 is about being curious. If you can actually, as I said to you, question 10, really kind of be happy not to know all of the answers and ask questions and grow, you will really grow your confidence throughout your career because you'll stay open-minded. So come into a scenario and rather than think, how do I get this right? Come into the scenario and think, what can I learn here? What do I need to know more of? What can I learn from these people? So even if it's somebody that is potentially triggering you, that you think, oh gosh, they're a bit senior to me, what is it they can learn from you? They've probably got you can learn from them rather. They've probably got a wealth of experience. So stay curious and find out, absorb, grow yourself by finding out more. So Robin, if you wouldn't mind sharing the final tips with us and moving the slide deck forward one. Know your triggers and reactions. We've started this piece of work now. You've got that worksheet. And in that moment, we've explored how being yourself makes the difference. Trust yourself as well as relying on knowledge and data and skill. You'll always have knowledge, data and skill. You'll be good at certain things. They'll be your strengths when it comes to your job role. But trust yourself as well and know your triggers. I want to share a quick story with the one in the middle. about the Zen Master. It's a story that Courageous Success we used actually a long time ago, and it reminded me this webinar of this wonderful story when my daughter was little. She's nearly 17 now. She had a Zen Master book, like bedtime reading, and there was this wonderful story in there that I'd like to just share with you when it comes to confidence and being positive. So it's first thing in the morning, and you've got a Zen Master and his apprentice. Beautiful morning, they're in Tibet or whatever, beautiful, lovely mountains, all green, wonderful. And they start off on their quest for the day. They're going on a walking journey together. And suddenly it starts to rain. So the rain's pouring down, and they come across a cottage. And in the cottage, there's a lovely kind of front door. And standing in the doorway, there is a beautiful lady with a long gown, and she just looks stunning and lovely. And in front of the cottage is this huge puddle. So she's basically trapped. So the Zen Master walks through the puddle. He's an old man, he's okay, I'm going to help this woman. He's bent over, but he picks her up and he puts her over his shoulder, and he turns around and he walks the other side of the puddle and he puts her down and goes on his merry way. So him and his apprentice carry on to help this lady. The sun comes out, it's a beautiful afternoon. They're at the top of a mountain, they're setting up camp. All sounds wonderful, doesn't it? With such cold weather at the moment. And the sun's setting, and they're lovely kind of setup for dinner. They're lighting the fire, and the Zen Master is all serene and looking at the world, and is it wonderful? And the apprentice is banging the pots around and he's throwing around the wood while he's setting up the fire, and he's obviously not happy. And the Zen Master says, "What's wrong with you? Look at this beautiful setting. We've had this wonderful day. Isn't the world magical?" And the apprentice says, "That woman this morning, that woman, you're an old man, you're bent over, you've got sore bones, you picked that woman up and you carried her across that puddle and you put her down beautifully. And she didn't say one word of thanks to you, not one. I'm so cross about it." And the Zen Master turns around to the apprentice and says, "I put that woman down 8 hours ago and you're still carrying her." And that's what happens. We tend to hold on to things that happen within our world. Be like the Zen Master. Let go of what angers you. It's not going to help. It's just not going to help. And it's going to take up loads of your energy and sap potentially as well the energy of those around you. So be the Zen Master, positive mindset, keep a positive perspective. And that's a choice. That's a choice that we all have the power to make. Finally, my final point before we go to Q&A is choosing positivity, okay? And we tend to forget that actually positivity is a choice. It is a choice. We're programmed as humans with fight or flight to notice negatives, to pick holes. That's kind of how we're, so that we protect ourselves. But actually choosing positivity is a choice. Picture it's a beautiful day, okay? It's not great, is it, at the moment? I think we're all spoilt with the weather this time last year in late April. Imagine it's a lovely day, and I'm stood outside the room that you're in now, with the building, and I've got an ice cream cart, and on that ice cream cart I've got 2 sets of ice cream, okay? And I've got chocolate and I've got strawberry ice cream. What would you like? Decide, just choose for yourself in your own mind. I'm gonna have strawberry, I'm gonna have chocolate, okay? Whatever. I'm going to come into the room that you're in and I've got some lovely fresh water. Would you like sparkling or still? Choose. Most of us, when we choose which ice cream we would like, don't actually think very hard. We just decide. We don't think, well, I'm going to wait for everyone else to decide what they're having so that I look good or I don't look different. We don't kind of check whether should I say chocolate because the boss is going to say chocolate, or the boss actually likes kind of like more different people. So I'm going to go strawberry, so I'm a bit different to him. We don't complicate it. We just choose. And choosing positivity is just as kind of like real. It's just the way that our brain works. So the vast majority of people, particularly in the UK, when we ask this question, they prefer chocolate ice cream to strawberry. So choose chocolate, choose positivity, make that decision. Just to be aware that at any moment, no matter what the circumstances, you can choose to put a positive frame on everything. And that will give yourself confidence, but it'll also give others confidence too. So really simple tool, it works, and it can change all kinds of things, not just in your career, but in your general world as well. So I hope that's been a useful set of tips and exploration into your trigger points, your strengths, your levels of resilience and those levers. There's a few tips in there about working under pressure as well. And also reflecting on how you're going about your world, whether you're letting your mood be affected by others, whether you're relying on yourself, and whether you're choosing positivity within your world. So, Robin, I'm really happy to take some questions. If anybody has any, then just type them in, shout, and I'll see if I can answer as many as possible.
Fantastic, Liz. Well, thank you for a great session there. And as Liz mentioned, it is now time for Q&A. So we've got about 10-15 minutes left of this session. We will get through as many as we can. Obviously, if your question isn't answered, don't worry. We do collect all the questions and I will be forwarding them on to Liz after this session. So let's get started. So this came through just before. How can you help your colleagues who you feel may be in this situation?
Really good question. The first thing I would say is that they definitely will be in this situation. In my experience, as I've said, and I've shared the stats and you've done your own polls, we all do tend to doubt ourselves. So there's a number of things that you can do. First of all, you being positive and you not giving your power away and not letting your mood be affected by others, you being yourself, you understanding your triggers, that will have a ripple effect on the colleagues that you have around you. As you know, if someone starts a negative conversation, ultimately people can stop and it can kind of build. So number one tactic would be to live and breathe the things yourself. But the other thing is kind of share, so just kind of sharing maybe aspects of today's webinar, or the kind of like maybe some of the worksheet aspects, or some of, if you like the Zen story, you might just put a picture of a Zen master on your desk or whatever, or on your Zoom background, and people kind of go, well, what have you got Zen Master on your Teams background for? Is that, well, I'll tell you this story that I heard on this positivity webinar, and I decided to let things go and those things. So there's ways and means of kind of sharing aspects of positivity, because we will all be affected by this at certain times in certain circumstances. And it's lovely to know that you want to share as well. Good.
Fantastic. How can I grow my confidence if I'm career pivoting into an entirely new industry where I won't have that breadth of knowledge and skills immediately?
Oh, I love that question. Thank you for asking that question. I'm going to say this really simply. It doesn't matter. So the fact that you don't know the industry and you haven't got the skills and the knowledge, your confidence actually shouldn't be affected. Why? What is that? Why am I saying that? Because, as I've said, you don't always need to know the answers. Go in with a real kind of like curiosity. What can I learn here? How can I absorb these things? And just be you, be yourself in those scenarios. So, I talked about not relying on, data and knowledge and those things always for your confidence, and definitely not people around you. Be the same person despite the fact that you're pivoting into a new career. Be you, have confidence in yourself, be positive, and naturally kind of absorb, have that growth mindset, absorb, be agile, be flexible. Say, I don't know all the answers, but I'm absolutely learning, and bring positivity, and you'll be absolutely fine. You'll nail it.
That's really good. Do you have any tips on keeping up your confidence when dealing with notoriously difficult personalities? A couple of times actually, this one.
I love the notoriously difficult personalities. By the way, we can all be difficult. We all think that we're not. We like to think that we're not, but actually we can all wind other people up as well. So yeah, absolutely, they're not dissimilar to what I've already said. Just because somebody's potentially being difficult doesn't necessarily mean that you need to let that affect you on the inside. So remember not to give your power away. Remember that exercise where you picked someone you didn't want to know, you didn't want to be there. Don't let that affect you. The other thing is that don't let that energy rub off on you. So from a positivity perspective, stay in your zone. if you think about that cycle of self-doubt, if you let that person intimidate you, or you allow yourself to change and adapt in that moment so that you impress that person, then you will always create this cavern of, this person is difficult and I'm not going to be able to nail this relationship with them. The answer to that is just to be yourself. I find it incredibly rare. I've worked with thousands and thousands and thousands of people over the course of my development career. It's incredibly rare that anybody gets up in the morning and decides that they're going to spend the day being difficult to others. They will probably just be coming from a different place, or they'll be stressed, or they'll be up against the clock, anxious, frustrated in some way. So don't make it about you, is my other point. You know, often people will be snappy or difficult or challenging, and actually it's got nothing to do with us. It's just their world and the situation they're in. So have compassion and try and see that, because most of us aren't difficult because we're consciously doing it. It's just because we're up against it ourselves and stressed and challenged. So I hope that's useful.
Just working through all these questions here. It's great. Here we go. I think I've got. Okay, this is good. How do you remember and use these tools if the insecurities have already set in?
Oh, start, make it a habit. Yeah, the minute you begin, it's then, like James shared, it's about remembering to do it. I'm going to say something really simple. You are not your insecurities. That's not who you are. That is not who you are. Okay. So even though you may feel like you've struggled in your life and career and have patterns of self-doubt, that's just stuff that's in your head. And I do find, even at a really senior level, you know, with people that are in their, you know, the later years and successfully in their careers, that actually those habits and patterns are really easy to crack. What we've got to do is just remember this stuff and constantly work on having confidence. It's not who you are. If you look at those confidence statements that you've created, if you know, for you, and this is the same for everybody, don't just take that exercise as face value today. Build on it. Okay. There's no prizes for kind of putting yourself down in this life. Just make a list, keep building that list, and use it. Use that list of, this is me, because you are funny and clever and kind and logical and those things, and you are not self-doubt, overthinking, worrying, fear. That's not who you are. That's just your reactions to the circumstances in your world and your life. So the answer is to remember. And to remember that that's your self-doubt isn't you. It's just stuff that you can develop.
We have time for one more question, and I'm going to ask this one, and then as I said previously, I will be forwarding all the questions that come through to Liz afterwards. So last question for the day: what's a good response if you feel you've been put on the spot for a question and don't immediately know the answer, so you look and feel confident?
Yeah, I love that. That's a brilliant question. What a great question. In that circumstance, my honest kind of response would be, I don't know, but I'm going to find out. You know, if you're put on the spot and you don't know the answer to that question and you don't know immediately, the worst thing to do is to kind of make things up. The second thing, the tactic that you can do, is ask more about the question. So, you know, let's say someone asks you I don't know, a reason why something needs to happen, and you're not sure of that. You can say, well, I'm not quite sure on that question. Can you tell me more about what you're looking for? Because what they might come back with is actually, because they maybe didn't frame the question well, or they might say, well, actually what I'm looking for is X, Y, and Z. Now you might only know the answer to Z. Okay, but you can share, well, I know this, I know Z, and that might help, but you know, maybe I'll have a look at those other areas and come back to you. So the best thing to do in that scenario is to share, if you don't know, you don't know. But then tell me more about what you're looking for. What is it? What are you know, what is it that you're interested in? How is that going to help? If you to break it up, what would it be? And just explore the question, because a lot of the time people aren't absolutely clear on what they're looking for. But there's nothing wrong with not knowing the answer, and they won't see you negatively if you don't know.
Yes, that also goes back to being your authentic self that you mentioned at the start, Liz, and that people really respond to that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Oh, you know, and I think sometimes when you're in your early stages of your career, you really underestimate actually the power of that vulnerability and being open to learning. You've got, you know, if you're in your early stages of your career, you absolutely have a mandate and a reason for not knowing. That's the point. You are there. So if you go through your early stages of your career feeling like you have to know all the answers, you won't necessarily learn as much. And I see people promoted, fast-tracked all the time that actually in their early stages of the career don't know the answers, but they're comfortable with that, and they're comfortable to ask the questions and absorb and find out more and have that learning. So turn it on its head, because it's really powerful and you have a mandate to do it. So use it.